I'd say there goes a happy man.
Peter Lawford. He was suave, sophisticated, and every bit a matinee idol. This British import parlayed his natural charm into a prosperous Hollywood film career.
Peter was always given very romantic parts because he was exceptionally handsome. He was one of the most handsome actors in the business at that time.
He had that English accent and a debonair quality. The women absolutely loved Peter Lawford. He was catnip to them.
Do you know what I did last night?
No, what?
I surveyed this whole boat and I discovered that you were the most attractive girl on board.
Well, thank you.
And I kept thinking that what a pity it is she's married, because that's going to make things terribly awkward.
But Peter Lawford is still more famous for his real-life dramas than his on-screen ones. You see, Peter kept some pretty impressive company in his day. He was pals with Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe, and John F. Kennedy. Yet despite his A-list connections, Lawford wound up at the bottom of the heap. On this episode of Mysteries and Scandals, we'll explore the sad story of a nice guy who just wanted to be loved.
Frank realized that if he were friendly with Peter, he might be friendly with the next president of the United States.
I'd like to say a few words about my brother-in-law, Senator John Kennedy. Hold it, Sarah, wait a minute.
We'll also expose the many failed relationships that destroyed the handsome actor.
He realized he was just being used by them, and that's when he started really going down the drain. He started drinking more and more and more because the Kennedys weren't being nice to him.
And will reveal the dirty little secrets that Lawford took with him to the grave.
I think that Peter Lawford was the man who knew too much. I think Peter Lawford knew who killed John Kennedy. I think Peter Lawford knew why Bobby Kennedy went after the mob. Peter Lawford knew who killed Marilyn Monroe. Peter Lawford knew everything, and eventually what he knew ended up killing him.
But was Lawford protecting his friends or covering his own tracks? Find out as we open the file on the man who kept the secrets, Peter Lawford. Christmas Eve, 1984. Peter Lawford died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles at the age of 61. He was never regarded as a brilliant screen actor, but in real life, Lawford expertly played the part of a dutiful pawn in one of the most notorious chess games in American history. Celebrity manager Jay Bernstein.
Peter was used by Joe Kennedy to help John Kennedy become president. Frank Sinatra used Peter to help Frank Sinatra be a part of the presidency. Marilyn Monroe used Peter to keep the relationship with John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, and everybody used Peter to the point where he finally got used up.
Actress and friend Jeanne Carmen.
He knew everything, and it's really too bad that Peter didn't tell us what he knew before he died. And by that time, what would it have hurt to know? Had he never have met the Kennedys, he'd have had a great life.
Biographer James Spada.
Peter Lawford was born on September 7, 1923 in London. He was the son of Sir Sidney Lawford, with whom May Aylen had had an affair. And once his illegitimacy became known, there was a very messy divorce.
May married Sir Sidney and they moved to France with little Peter. The youngest Lawford lived a privileged childhood filled with plenty of money but not much love.
He loathed his mother from a very early age because she never wanted him. She was really the mother from hell, if I may say that. She dressed him as a girl until he was 11 years old. She alternately smothered him with affection and then would ignore him for days at a time.
Sir and Lady Lawford traveled frequently, and Peter found it hard to make friends. Not that he didn't invite his share of attention.
Peter was such a handsome young boy who grew into be such a handsome man that women were always attracted to him. There were always stories that he had been molested by governesses, by different people in his youth.
In 1943, 19-year-old Peter left his family to pursue his dream of becoming an actor. The handsome Brit moved to Hollywood and was quickly snatched up by MGM. The studio put Lawford to work in a string of small supporting roles.
He did a lot of big movies. He did pictures from Dorian Gray to Son of Lassie to Good News. He did a lot of hits. They weren't necessarily Peter Lawford movies, but he was in these ensemble hits during the 8 years that he was with MGM.
He was a bobby sox Irish, extremely handsome young man, and very, very charming, and he had that English accent and a debonair quality.
Lady Lawford soon became strangely jealous of Peter's success and plotted to extinguish her son's rising star.
She went to his boss, Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM, and said that she thought her son was a homosexual. Louis B. Mayer, stunned, brought Peter in because Peter was one of their major stars. Peter was able to convince Louis B. Mayer that it was not true. Peter didn't know that his mother had done this to nearly ruin his career, and when he found out later, he never forgave her.
Lawford survived the sabotage attempt and went on to be voted Movie Life's most popular actor in Hollywood in 1945. It seems Peter was popular off-screen as well. Peter fell hard for blonde siren Lana Turner. Too bad for Lawford, Lana didn't feel the same way. She dumped him hard as soon as she found another guy.
Peter, after his bad experience with Lana Turner, didn't have bad experiences with women after that because he wasn't that serious about them. Sure, you could go out with an Ava Gardner, but just don't fall in love with her.
Now, just to show you how much confidence I have in myself, I will make my choice by just looking at the legs.
In 1952, after almost 9 years at MGM, Lawford was let go.
It's a good question why Peter Lawford never fought for better roles. The answer is that he never had enough self-esteem to really pursue it.
Peter continued to find work in Hollywood and spent his free time painting the town red. During one outing, Lawford met the future president of the United States.
John F. Kennedy used to like to come to Hollywood, and during one of his visits, he met Peter Lawford. Peter actually introduced John F. Kennedy to a couple of starlets in Hollywood. And then John Kennedy's sister met Peter Lawford at a party. And they were very attracted to each other.
After a brief romance, Peter and Patricia Kennedy made it official on April 24th, 1954.
My feeling is that Peter fell in love with Pat Lawford because he liked her class, and he was a very classy guy. But also, with the Kennedys, he had a place finally to belong.
Little did Lawford know the blessing was really a curse in disguise. Coming up, Peter plays dangerous games with Sinatra, Monroe, and Washington's first family.
Do you live in New York?
No, I've been there on business for some time, but I'm just going home now for the wedding.
The royal wedding?
Yeah.
You're going to the wedding?
Well, I'm escorting someone, yes.
Well, you really are a lord, aren't you?
I'm afraid so.
In April of 1954, pretty boy actor Peter Lawford married into American royalty when he tied the knot with Patricia Kennedy. Lawford, who always struggled to find a place to belong, suddenly found himself in with a very powerful in-crowd.
The Kennedys were party people, and he introduced them to all the starlets. Peter's beach house was, I called it the playpen, because everybody was there and they were drinking.
Marriage did little to curtail the playboy lifestyles of both Lawford and his new brother-in-law.
John F. Kennedy loved to come out to California. Whether or not Pat Lawford really was aware of everything that was going on is questionable.
On one visit, Peter introduced Jack to a glamorous blonde actress named Marilyn Monroe. But we'll come back to that story in a minute. In the meantime, Peter landed a gig playing the lead role in a TV comedy, Dear Phoebe. Lawford also got in tight with a bunch of Hollywood bad boys.
This was his halcyon times. The Rat Pack of Frank Sinatra, Peter Lawford, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and Joey Bishop was equally as big in the consciousness of the world, and particularly America, as the Beatles.
They seemed to have it all. You know, all the booze they could drink, all the cigars they could smoke, all the women that they could have, plus great wealth and fame and money.
Journalist James Bacon.
Oh, geez, those guys drank. Yeah, they drank. Peter kept up with Frank. He was the only one that kept up with Frank.
What do we do? It presents a problem, doesn't it?
The Rat Packers made several movies, including Ocean's 11 in 1960. The pack also played to sell-out crowds in Vegas. actor and comic Joey Villa.
They had the excitement. They had it. It was something. And Peter Lawford, all he did was run in between doing one-liners here, because he couldn't sing, he couldn't dance, he couldn't tell a joke, and he just ran in between them and did little things.
Entertainer Sonny King.
They didn't need him, but Frank hired him because, you know, it kept him close to the Kennedys.
Frank treated him well if he did things the way Frank wanted. But if you didn't do it Frank's way, you didn't do it at all.
You like your quarters here in the hotel? Very much. You like your salary? Yeah. You like your billing? Yeah. Get off,
Sam. Do what and take Freddie Bartholomew with you.
The story goes that Sinatra used Lawford to get in good with the commander-in-chief.
Peter Lawford was the go-between. The whole world knows it. And Frank Sinatra, in his whole life, wanted nothing more than to be ambassador to Italy. And that's why he was so close to Kennedy.
In 1962, Frank invited JFK to stay at his Palm Springs home during a trip to California. Sinatra spent several months and several $1,000s to bring his pad up to par for the president. And that's when the Attorney General dropped the bomb.
Bobby Kennedy didn't want his brother to stay with Frank because Sam Giancana, one of the heads of the mob, had stayed in that same place. And Bobby didn't like Frank anyway and felt that it was harmful to what Bobby was doing to try to break up organized crime.
Peter had to tell Frank that the President of the United States was no longer going to stay with him.
I was at Frank Sinatra's house at the time that the explosion came. He literally threw Peter Lawford down the flight of stairs. Literally threw him down and never spoke to him again. And it was a pitiful thing.
He figured that Peter should have talked him out of it, but you know, Peter didn't have that kind of power. He couldn't talk him out of it.
It was the end of Peter's everything. There was nothing good in Peter's life after Frank divorced him and castrated him. Then after that, he couldn't get a job. And it was very hard.
Lawford was caught between a rock and the White House and wound up losing the friend that meant the most to him. Up next, Lawford lands at the center of one of the biggest mysteries in Hollywood history. Did he know who or what killed Marilyn Monroe? All in all, the 60s were not a good decade for Peter Lawford. After nearly 20 years in show business, Lawford found himself stuck in a different kind of business.
He was fixing up the Kennedys, he was fixing up other people, actors, he was getting everybody together. At one point he said, "I'm feeling like a Kennedy pimp." And it was like he was no longer Peter, he was some robot that the Kennedys were using. I mean, he was just a pawn for them as far as I'm concerned.
In 1962, Peter arranged to have Marilyn Monroe sing Happy Birthday to President Kennedy at a gala celebration in his honor.
But I'll give her an introduction anyway, Mr. President, because in the history of show business, perhaps there has been no one female who meant so much, who has done more.
It was no secret that Monroe and JFK were in the midst of a steamy affair, a romance that Lawford was instrumental in engineering.
Mr. President, the late Marilyn Monroe.
The night that she sang Happy Birthday to President Kennedy was the night that Marilyn Monroe and President Kennedy no longer were involved. The president realized that she was emotionally unstable.
When the affair with JFK went south, Monroe reportedly took up with the younger Kennedy brother Robert.
Well, once again, Marilyn was very upset when she realized that Bobby wasn't serious about this relationship. She felt that they had used her.
Marilyn thought the Kennedys used Lawford as well.
She said, "The poor, handsome devil. He takes so much and gets so little." She said, "Those damn Kennedys, the way they manipulate him."
The rumor is that Marilyn threatened to hold a press conference on the Monday after she died and reveal the fact that she had had an affair with the president and with Bobby. If they didn't contact her, they did take the threat very seriously, and Bobby did come to her home on the day she died to try to talk her out of that.
Peter Lawford spoke to Marilyn Monroe the night she died. Peter told me Marilyn said, "Tell the president goodbye." And it upset Peter very much, and he thought he should go over and talk to Marilyn because he figured something was wrong.
It's unclear whether Lawford ever made it over to Marilyn's home the night she died. The only thing that's certain is that Monroe was found dead on August 5th, 1962 of an apparent drug overdose.
She did not kill herself. I wouldn't even go there. She got killed. Peter would definitely be the one to help cover up her death. There was a rumor that Peter put all those pill bottles on her nightstand. That was a definite rumor, and I truly believe it.
Lawford remained tight-lipped about what he knew of Monroe's death.
Peter was willing to do anything for the Kennedys.
He knew what happened. He didn't have to think. So that's why he went totally down the tubes after that.
Peter was tremendously guilty about Marilyn Monroe's death. He really felt that had he not introduced her to JFK and to Bobby, had he maybe done something to prevent what happened between them, and then a little over a year later, John F. Kennedy is assassinated.
Lawford took the death of JFK pretty hard.
Peter absolutely lost control. He loved John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was this shining light. At this point, Peter was a shell of a man. He didn't have any of these associations that had given him his own sense of self-worth, and it was all gone.
Well, the tragedies happened all around Peter. It would be like bombs dropping, but they didn't hit him, but they hit everybody he loved.
His marriage to Pat Kennedy at that point was tremendously strained. Once John F. Kennedy was no longer president, Pat Lawford didn't feel that she had to stay married to Peter.
The couple separated in 1964 and divorced 2 years later.
Washington breathed easier when divorced Pat because they didn't have to have Secret Service guys looking after Peter Lawford.
Man, this guy could not catch a break. Straight ahead, Lawford digs his own grave with a lethal combination of booze, dope, and self-pity.
Oh, don't give me that line about our obligation to our public.
We have one, you know.
The public feeds on our shortcomings more than it does on our virtues. The public disowns us, we still live with our problems. So let's approach things from the proper end. Ourselves.
Following his divorce from Pat Kennedy in 1966, actor Peter Lawford was the man without a country. After years of being in the limelight, Lawford was alone with nowhere to turn.
All these people he thought were his friends, all these people that he had helped, turned their backs on him. It was a real difficult time for Peter Lawford.
Peter never got a second chance after the Kennedy years, the Rat Pack, which all coincided. He kept trying to stay young. He kept trying to stay beautiful.
In 1966, the 43-year-old actor was admitted to the Leahy Clinic in Boston, where doctors discovered that Lawford had a severely enlarged liver. The years of boozing were catching up to Peter.
His doctor told him that he would die if he had another drink. And the first thing he did when he left the clinic was to go to a bar and have a drink.
In 1967, Lawford reunited with the only Rat Pack member who still spoke to him, Sammy Davis Jr. The two paired up for the big screen flop.
Salt and pepper.
I'm peppery salt.
You and me against all of them guys? Oh, you're looking at a very unhappy African.
I don't think it did much at the box office, but that was about the only movie he made in those later years.
Lawford managed to find enough work to stay afloat, but in 1968 he had to give up his bachelor pad beach house. Still, the charming ladies' man found plenty of young women to keep him company. By 1976, the guy was married and divorced twice, to women half his age. The only constant in Lawford's life was the bottle.
Peter really became a drug addict and an alcoholic for most of his adult life. Peter was very concerned about staying youthful and being hip. And in the 70s, you know, drugs were the young, hip thing to do.
It would take him 5 minutes to get a cigarette up to his mouth. He was really gone. I've never seen anything like it. It made me cry.
Oddly enough, Lawford never ratted on his famous in-laws, who turned their backs on him. Peter could have sold his Kennedy secrets for millions, but never said a word.
I'd like to one day write a book for myself and just, you know, put it on that shelf over there, but not for... I might write a book and say a few things about them, but not a book about the Kennedys.
Yeah. In 1976, 53-year-old Peter began dating 17-year-old Patty Seton, the girl who became the last Mrs. Lawford.
Toward the end, Peter was really destitute. He was taken to selling memorabilia on the little cinema shops on Hollywood Boulevard, just trying to make whatever money he could.
After nearly a year in and out of the hospital, Lawford finally gave up the ghost on December 24th, 1984. His ashes were buried in Westwood Memorial Cemetery, not far from his old friend Marilyn Monroe.
Pat Seton, who was now his widow, didn't have very much money, and she was not able to pay for the crypt that Peter's ashes were interred in, and no one else came forward to help, and I find that very sad.
Lawford's remains were removed from the cemetery in 1988 and scattered over the Pacific Ocean. Even in death, the guy got no respect.
Peter Lawford would be very lucky to get fourth billing in the story of his own life if they made a movie of it, because the first billing would go to John Kennedy, the second to Frank Sinatra, the third to Marilyn Monroe, and hopefully Peter would get fourth if his mother, May, didn't somehow screw that up for him.
He took a lot of crap from a lot of people, and he shouldn't have, because you respect the star. Peter, I love you.
Peter Lawford spent his life trying to be everyone's best friend. Too bad he gave all the good stuff away and forgot to keep something for himself. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time we meet in a state of mind called Hollywood.
Mr. Bosdick agreed this office wasn't big enough for both of us. So since you won...
Oh, do we have to part so coldly? One little goodbye kiss to remember you by. Who knows? Our paths may never cross again. Just one little friendly goodbye kiss.